Aruchunan Vaseekaran. He's the founder of Ontash, New Jersey, and he has got offices in different countries, the US, India, and Sri Lanka. So it'd be very interesting to hear what he has to say about his experience and challenges of building an IT firm. Please go ahead, Mr. Aruchunan. And you're a trained engineer and computer scientist as well. So I just must include that.
Hello there. Can you hear me?
Thank you. Please go ahead. Yes, we can.
Good.
Thank
I'm just going to share my screen. Okay. Everyone can see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, very good. So just a brief introduction to myself. I live in New Jersey, United States. I've been working there, been there for over 30 years. And I am a computer scientist by training. For I guess the last maybe 20 plus years, I've set up a company which does work mainly in healthcare. We work with maybe about 3 or 4 companies, which in turn work with several American hospitals. We have a small IT team, which we've again developed. And I'm going to talk about my experiences as to how we built up this team in several countries. We have offices in the US, which is our head office, and we have offices in Kerala as well as in Colombo, and hope to have one in Jaffna in maybe next year in 2021. Would have wanted to do it this year, but unfortunately the whole COVID situation interrupted a lot of things. While we work in healthcare, we also work in sort of more vanilla IT sort of services and products, both in the US as well as in Asia. And I'll talk a little bit about those because those are relevant to some of the things that are needed in Jaffna, as well as in the rest of Sri Lanka. We are basically grew organically, self-funded. So we've learned a lot, I think, along the way. We built a culture, and I think that's very important. I'll talk a little bit more about that. And much of our experience, I think, applies to anybody who needs to develop or who is looking to develop IT in the Northern Province. And also, I'll talk about some ideas for some projects that will be relevant in the Northern Province. A little history. So we started our first offshore center in Kerala, actually in Calicut, in 2005. I think that's the 3rd largest city in Kerala. Not too unlike Sri Lanka, that is in Jaffna, in terms of its sort of culture and maybe the outlook of people. At that time, the IT industry there was very small. It was nascent, like compared to say Chennai or Bangalore. But we had some friends over there, and it has plenty of graduates. So we thought it would be a good place. We thought it was out of the way, away from all the competition of Chennai and Bangalore, and we thought it would be a good place to start. So we've learned a lot in 10 years, or 10 plus years really, since we've been there, about how to hire people, train them, keep them productive, and most importantly, to retain them. We started our second center in Colombo in 2015, and really we basically copied our template that we had developed with some difficulty in India, and it went very smoothly. I think we were kind of running up and running and productive within about 6 months. A typical project has people working from multiple locations. So what that means is that people can plug into the rest of the company and learn from the rest of the company much quicker. So again, this is something that is a way to get things in Jaffna or any other location up and running very fast. Once you have a successful template, which you've invested some time into, then you can use that to bring up other centers or other locations much faster. We started our third location in Cochin in February of 2020. And again, shooting to open one in Jaffna in October 2021. The second tier cities are advantageous. There's a lot of captive talent. When I say captive, I mean, yes, there are a lot of people who want to leave these cities. They want to go to the big cities, whether it be Colombo or Bangalore or the US. They want to go there for obviously, the higher salaries and everything else, and all the other perks. However, there are people who don't want to do that for a variety of reasons. They may be looking after a relative. They may have a lot of other personal reasons for doing that. And these are people that you can work with. We actually look for people who want to stay. Because we don't want to train somebody and have them go. Though the majority of our people eventually do leave us. There's also less congestion in these cities. Talking about India, it can take hours to get to work sometimes in a big city, sometimes 2 hours to get from anywhere, maybe more. It's also a better quality of life for some people. It's also maybe easier travel. Actually, it's easier for me to get to Calicut in Kerala than it is to get to Sri Lanka in terms of, say, the airline options. And that's going to be true eventually of many other second-tier cities. And there's also less competition from these big IT companies. I'm talking about the HCLs and the Infosys of the world, which really set up a presence in these big cities, and they scoop up a lot of people. So there's much less competition also in these second-tier cities. And all advantages apply to Jaffna too, if you look at it that way. Okay. So for me, I think culture is central to whatever you do, and that comes down to purpose and values. It also comes down to everything. It flows down into HR, how you recruit people, how you train, how you mentor them, what their career path is. And then, of course, the engineering side, what are your engineering best practices? What are the tools you use, and so on. So any traditional business is organized in a way which is not suited to like a modern knowledge business. And really what's going to happen is that whether you like it or not, any business out there today is going to have to become an IT business. It's just a question of how fast that's going to happen. You're seeing it here in the States, maybe to a higher degree than you're seeing it. You're seeing it in Sri Lanka or India, but it is happening. So what does a traditional business mean? It tends to be hierarchical. People are there based on qualifications, not necessarily on merit. Communication, information sharing is opaque. I've heard of stories about big Indian IT companies, blue chip IT companies, where you're not encouraged to talk to your co-workers. You're not encouraged to be on Facebook or to sort of surf the web. In fact, in some companies, you're locked out of. All these kinds of mindsets, this whole mindset is not suitable for a modern knowledge business. So I just want to highlight this and say that what we do need to do is to build a very different culture, and it takes time, but it can be done. So one aspect of culture is having a clear purpose and values. This is going to differ from company to company, but I think you need to think this through, and you have to say this is my purpose and this is my values. That includes what does this company do? Are we going to build smart cars? Are we going to build accounting systems? What kind of relationships do you value? So for instance, I prefer to value like long-term relationships. I'd rather work with a few small companies on a longer term than to work with lots of companies on maybe a shorter term and a more transactional term. And that's a choice. But I think you need to think these through because that will eventually impact how your company functions and how your people function. I think transparency is a must in any modern company. You really need to have that sharing of information, And this also gets down to this point about, people not really, asking for help or telling people how to solve a problem. So at the high level, you really need to encourage transparency. You also need to encourage continuous improvement and accountability for the work that you do. All these things over here are very easy to sort of explain, extremely hard to implement. You have to ingrain this, and that takes a lot of time, lots of little conversations, lots of little policies, discussions. Very, very hard to do, very easy to say, but I cannot emphasize enough how much time and how much effort that you have to give to this. A lot of things will flow out of stressing these kinds of values. Working with people, recruitment is extremely hard. In India, in Calicut, there are a lot of schools. There are, IIT class schools, lots of, class B universities, lots of places. But it's very hard to find people. I would say that, we take in, or we find acceptable less than 5% of all applicants. We do have a technical test. We do emphasize, we want somebody to stay for 2 years. We don't want somebody like staying for 6 months and leaving. So we kind of look for those things. Again, this is important because, you don't want people coming and going. You rather work with a person who is, how do I say it, not the most technically experienced or talented. You would rather work with somebody who is willing to stay and learn. It'll serve your company better. Training, we have a sort of a 6-month structured training program, in-house. We also have, online courses, links to web resources. And again, this is an area where we have to spend a lot more time on. So this is a work in progress as to how we train people. But again, very, very important, because the kind of training that you receive in school is not sufficient for most IT jobs, whether it be here in the States or here anywhere really. So people have to be encouraged, taught to work to learn themselves for themselves, and that's hard. And I guess a lot of that is really driven by people's motivation, the motivation to go out and look for stuff themselves. We have a highly collaborative work environment, so that we are always on Hangouts. We're always working through chat groups. We have tools, and that is, to me, sort of half the learning is through that work environment. For somebody sitting in, say, in Kerala or Colombo, being able to reach out to somebody in the U.S. And talk with them about through problems, that's huge. It's great for motivation. It's also great to they are obviously impressed or proud of the fact that they're dealing with people from different countries. That helps to retain people. Again, getting back to retaining people is very hard. We work at it. We try to say, okay, how can we retain people beyond 2 years? How can we retain people for 4, 5, 6, 7 years? Very hard to do, but you need to give that a lot of thought, in addition to your sort of what your primary business is about, what product or service you're building. So retention is extremely hard thing to do. Okay, I'll talk a little bit about engineering practices and tools. And the first thing, there are a lot of tools out there which are going to help you do your business. The first thing I want to stress is, you can't dictate this top down. A lot of companies, will say, okay, hey, everybody use this tool. And, people really don't get it. They don't understand why they should use it. So you have to kind of introduce these things gently. Maybe have a small group of people evaluating a tool, and then, testing it out for some time on a few projects, and then slowly bring it into to other projects. The same thing applies to best practices. tools and best practices are continuously evolving, and you have to think about it. You have to keep thinking about it and keep updating that. I mean, I guess that's one of my primary functions in my organization. But as your organization gets larger, then you probably need like, one or two people dedicated to just this task. Just to give you an idea of the kinds of tools that we use, which may be relevant for somebody starting a company, I think WhatsApp is a huge tool these days because, that seems to be the quickest way to communicate. And what we do is, every time we have a project or even a sub-project, we set up a WhatsApp group and then, people discuss over that. We use Google Suite. So that's like Gmail. It's also chat. It's also Hangout. And of course, I guess there's a word processor and stuff like that on that. It's a little bit pricey, but I think it's well worth it. We use something called Jira for source code control. Again, very important to have something or some equivalent tool in place that everybody understands, especially if you're doing software. We also have a tool called Confluence, which we use for project documentation. Another important tool which everybody needs to have in any software organization is some kind of continuous integration tool called, and the one we use is called Jenkins, but there are several out there. With respect to our best practices, we document them and we keep refining them as we go along. So every 3 months we kind of look at it and say, okay, how can we do better? Sometimes we look at it, even more frequently than that. Okay, I'll talk a little bit about some of the small projects that we do in India and Sri Lanka. Okay, the same needs really apply in the northern province. All these projects really have to do with digitizing small and medium-sized businesses. And the needs, when you compare those needs to the needs in, say, the US or the UK, it's very similar, but the degree of finish and sophistication that's required is less in Asia. One, for us, a big advantage of working on these projects is that our engineers get to relate to some of these products, and they can see the impact that it has. If you're working on a project which is abroad, with some hospital in America, you don't have that first-hand connection to it. You're just kind of sending files back and forth and fixing bugs. Whereas if you're working on something which is like installed in your city, it has more meaning, and I think also it's a way for people to learn a lot more about what they're doing to improve their skills. So in terms of India and Sri Lanka, we're working with an ERP package which is called Odoo. It's something out of Belgium. For those of you who've heard, it's something comparable to SAP or Microsoft Dynamics. It's much cheaper. And it handles your basic business functions. It digitizes your basic business functions. That includes e-commerce, that includes website, CRM, accounting, and so on. So really, if you look at a solution like this, most of the business needs would be handled by a solution like this, relatively inexpensively. So one of the things that we did in Kerala is that we took this ERP package and we built a hospital management system, which is like a complete solution for a hospital. It handles your patient medical records, it handles billing, pharmacy, inventory. And we've had this working at a hospital in Calicut for, I think, over 2 years now. And we're now trying to get it going at the Telepalai Cooperative Hospital. They have the software installed, but they're not, they haven't fully implemented it. So this is one way, in which, in whatever your area of expertise is, you can take something that you build somewhere else, and then you can kind of implement it locally, and provide some benefit, and also train the people that you have working for you in Sri Lanka. These are some screenshots of the software. I think the main takeaway over here is that the software is available on is responsive, which is to say that it's available on multiple form factors: your desktop, your iPad, your phone, and so on. And this, by the way, is going to be a requirement for anything you build today. Is that it needs to be responsive. It needs to be available on multiple devices. I talk a little bit about something called Willows. This is something that we just implemented again in Calicut, but this type of application is very relevant to Sri Lanka and probably many other places in India. So basically, it's an app which allows you to communicate within an app, apartment or flat or a building association. So let's say you have a block of flats, and you usually have a a supervisor or a caretaker for that building. Well, he's got to transact business with people who are living in the flat. And this app basically facilitates that. This app is available on a software as a service model. So you can do things like you can schedule maintenance requests, you can pay your association dues, send notices, and so on. Again, this is just an example of the kinds of things that would be needed in Sri Lanka, and there are lots of other examples like this. And I think from a business point of view, it makes sense to. I mean, these things are needed. They have a business rationale, and you sort of can build a company just on things like this. These are some screenshots of the application. So in conclusion, I've just put up my contact information over here. Love to talk to any of you about while we're hiring, any ideas that people might have, any kind of collaboration. Some of these projects that we're doing for charities. The one we're doing with the Telepalai Cooperative Hospital. We're providing the software free. So we're certainly willing to do things like that where it makes sense. So please, again, feel free to contact us with any questions or suggestions, ideas. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vasi, for that talk and explaining. And it's wonderful to hear that you're hiring and we get more people working in that area, and also for your work at the Telepalai Cooperative Hospital. So finally, and before I just go on to Jiva giving the summary, is that a lot of people do communicate with each other after these sessions, because as you are aware, they usually are quite long, and so there's no time for people to ask questions and answer. So please go ahead and continue to talk to each other and let us know how the communication, what happens, because we'd love to get feedback from you. And finally, and most importantly, Jiva, please, Jiva is her full name is Mrs. Jiva Perumal Pillai Essex, and she is a former development economist who worked with the World Bank and several other groups. She's also worked along with the Asian Development Bank and the United Nations and the International Finance Corporation. So she will give a few concluding remarks to round up this whole meeting. Thank you, Jiva. Please go ahead.
Hi, thanks, Renuka. Thank you very much. Very rich discussions, and it's very difficult to summarize, so to speak. But I have to admit that a few areas I think that from my big takeaways was the fact that there's a great potential still to go, and there's still people going to explore, even though there are sort of challenges to establishing businesses in Jaffna. I mean, one of the things that was quite interesting from Simon's presentation was the fact that let's forget Jaffna. Maybe we should focus on Kilinochchi, for example. because that's where a lot of the YAL IT people, the geeks during the year have been much more progressive, and many more businesses coming out of there from his YAL IT experience. So, why focus on Jaffna? Why not in the Vanni area? Is one takeaway and one question that I have. I think that there is also a lot of industries that can use, and I think this is where people like Mano Sergaram, who's up there, can convince government to provide more e-services. I mean, I find that especially if you're sort of in this remote areas and your connectivity is an issue, why not have e-services, public service that is electronically and digitally provided? This will again encourage a lot more use of much of this digital infrastructure. And unfortunately, compared to a lot of our countries in the subcontinent, I think Sri Lanka is still very backward in that area. So even though it's a $1 billion business, our public service, which is the largest employer, unfortunately is not digitally connected in any way, except for a few, I think probably the Department of Immigration. But yet you still have to have a paper copy there. I think that I think it's the public service and the banking sector. So I'm very glad to hear that Tyagaraja is thinking of different ways to actually digitize the banking sector. I think that's very important. I think that COVID, again, has, as many speakers have mentioned, has provided an opportunity to show how we can actually work remotely and things function. And actually, this is IT industry should really be in the forefront of this, I think, in Sri Lanka. It's a great opportunity. We have the brains, we have the capacity. It doesn't matter where you're situated. If we can actually provide resources that can build the capacity and funds actually come back. I mean, if people don't want to live in Jaffna, that's fine, but maybe the remittances help to develop the economy in Jaffna. I mean, if that is the model that people want to actually take on. We've also learned that money is not an issue, and I think that's very important. So there is money there to invest. So let's just come up with the ideas. It doesn't matter where it is, but as long as it can now impact the whole country, that's most important. I'm very happy to see people like Ontash and Vaseekaran actually trying to establish a big business, because I think, again, what he's doing in the medical system, I think is very important. I think 2 years ago, I think someone in the YAL IT actually got something where they were going to monitor, digitize medical records. So Sayandan should actually connect those people with Ontash, because there's already some investments that have already gone in that area. So I think that there's lots of, the social issues, trying to establish and get the Jaffna community to actually encourage businesses in their own, in Jaffna itself, may be difficult, but I think that there are opportunities in other areas. And if one area I really want to think is, and Vaseekaran was at the end talking about, we want people who are willing to stay and willing to, and I think that this is where we really can focus on women. And women are a very important part of the Jaffna and the northern community. And as YAL IT and these geek challenges have shown, there are lots of women who are actually involved in the digital world in the northern province. So it would be really good if industries could focus on encouraging women and providing them with a safe environment, and actually, because they are the ones who will stay. They will not migrate. They are the ones who are the caretakers of the old age people. So let's try and just focus on this woman. I think we have a great opportunity. The women are the backbone of the northern area. They have invested, provide them with the right environment, secure environment, and believe me, I think you can have a woman, focused industry in IT in the North. I mean, that is, and I've lived in Jaffna, and I find most of the women are a lot more progressive, a lot more innovative. They're shy, but you can get the best out of them. So I would like to leave that message to the panelists, to the audience. Please invest in the woman. You will get your bang for your buck. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lisa, for that wonderful summary. And also just a note that something that I realized later when we put the panel together, they were all male. So we need a few women there as well.